Good day to you. I'm very pleased to have Major-General Roland de Vries back to talk to us today. This is his third talk. His first talk was about his time in Rhodesia, commanding South African troops in Rhodesia, in the southeast of the corner of the country. And his second talk was about mobile warfare, which I found very interesting. As an extension of that second talk, we're going to be listening to something that is practical in relation to mobile warfare. So, Roland, how are you? Lovely to see you again.
Wonderful to see you, Tony. I feel at home with the Rhodesians. I've been part of you. I've worn your rank insignia, and it's great talking to you. Even though it is in English, my second language, but I'm ready for being interrogated by you. And
Yes.
if you want to give a short introduction, I know that we've spoken in the past, had informal discussions. I sent a lot of material through to you with regards to the battles in Southeast Angola, which we refer to as Operation Modular, followed by Operation Hooper and Packer, and then Displace, and later on in the West, Operation Prone, with the smaller elements of that operation being Operations Excite. And it's all strange military names as code words for operations, and Ignite, etc., etc. But the focus today is about the attack on FAPLA, the Angolan Forces 16th Brigade, on the 9th of November 1987. Now, that was the period when these high-intensity conventional battles took place in southeast Angola, to the east and the west of what we refer to as, in our talks, as the Quito River. And the Quito River becomes the Quito River, where the Quito and the Konowali rivers flow into each other at Quito Konowali. It's this little strategic hamlet around which everything sort of materialized during those battles. Would you like to say something before we start? I know I sent you several maps. It's difficult to sort of give a brief about these operations over a short period of time, but yes, I'm going to do my level best. So thanks for that.
No, that's wonderful. My question really is to put this battle in context. Could you give a strategic overview of what the aims of the enemy were? I mean, their strategic aim was to defeat UNITA, and the tactics they used to achieve that aim is the battle that we're going to talk about, or one of them, where they tried to attack eastwards into UNITA territory. I think their interim goal was to capture Mavinga. Is that correct?
Mavinga and Jamba, but I'll explain that in a jiffy. Okay. I would like to start off, Tony, by the way, are you going to send the maps or provide for the maps in your presentation?
Yes, okay, very much so.
Because it's interesting if you bring the terrain into perspective with regards to how these operations unfolded from both sides. I mean, the enemy force, to put it bluntly, were the Angolan armed forces and the Air Force, supported by the Russians, and especially the Cubans. They had large Cuban contingents deployed at Quito Konowali. And of course, the East Germans, the Eastern Bloc nations supported UNITA, whilst very slyly the Americans supported UNITA. I know that we had American Special Forces teams that were deployed with UNITA, and they were armed with Stingers. We saw them, the teams firing the Stingers, but we never saw the teams. But that the advantage of the Stingers were that they sort of perturbed the attacks by the MiGs and kept them above a ceiling of 12,000 feet at most instances, but not all the time. But I'd like to start off. By the way, how much time do we have available today?
Well, as much time as you want. I'm on professional Zoom, so we can go for as long as you like.
All right, Tony, I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible and also as short as possible.
Okay.
But I would like to start off by asking you, what intrigued you about the battle, the attack against 16th Brigade on the 9th of November at the source of the Shembinga, east of the Quito River? It was the attacking position was situated about 27 kilometers from Quito Konowali, It was the advanced positions to protect Quito-Carnevale, the advanced positions that was mounted by the Angolan forces, and it was an extremely strategic position. What intrigued you about that battle? When you
Well,
started reading about that, we talked about that.
to me, it reminded me of the salient at Kursk in the Second World War, where the enemy, the Russians in that case, in the Second World War, 1943, had broken through the German lines. And I appreciate there may not have been fixed lines in this battle, but it's
Yeah.
nonetheless a penetration eastward into UNITA territory. And obviously it had to be dealt with. So that parallel intrigued me. And I don't know,
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if it qualifies as a salient, but I think that was
Absolutely, because in short, it is always a play. What in our instance, it was always a play when it came to conventional warfare mixed with unconventional warfare. Typically, mobile warfare for Africa. The playoff was between the attritional side of warfare against the more mobile approach, which I refer to as the maneuverist approach. Uh, but I termed it in my book as mobile warfare, which is a mix between semi-conventional warfare, uh, more conventionally oriented warfare, and of course mixed with unconventional warfare and guerrilla warfare, which we had the right mixture for those battles to be fought in Southeast Angola. Okay,
right.
so perhaps if you want me to give some background, I'm going to try and give this as short as possible. But coming back to Kursk quickly, you will remember that I said that when we started planning for the attack on 16th Brigade, which was a classic turning maneuver. We wanted to turn the forces of FAPLA around, which relates to the concepts of warfare with regards to preemption, disruption, and dislocation. Um, Dislocating your enemy forces psychologically, and then also disrupting their organizational cohesion. That's sort of a baseline for the planning of operations, and I will try and explain how this worked out with regards to setting up the battle against the 16th Brigade at the source of the Shambinga River. Now, with regards to Kursk, um, if I were the Germans, I would have never ventured into that territory. I may add, lessons learned from the wars fought by Napoleon, and I think it's just the terrain is just against you, the weather conditions, uh, time and space, and the ferocity of the Soviet forces when you attack them in their strong point positions. It's completely wrong, and I think that's where we erred. Uh, During Operation Hooper and Packer, when we tried to attack the salient of Papla at Quito-Carnevale after it was heavily reinforced by the Cubans, and of course supported by the Russians at that stage, to forfeit your mobility and to attack with a reasonably small force against a very strong defensive position across an obstacle such as the Quito River. But anyway, to come back and to set the background, uh, which
I,
led
I,
up to,
I
yes,
think,
Tony?
sorry. I also think that the Germans made a terrible mistake of trying to cut the waist of that salient in the way that they did, because
Absolutely.
it was the most strongly
Yeah.
defended part of the front with the Russians very strongly holding the waist. I would have made a bigger
A
attack.
double envelopment.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now it's interesting when you look at the forms of maneuver, it always comes in three forms. And this is something that we learned from warfare by Napoleon. Um, the first step usually was uh, the frontal attack to fix the enemy forces. And then, as you said, the second step was the envelopment or the double envelopment, which turns the face of the enemy and forces him to use his mobile reserve. And the area which is created, that's why I always say we must make the battlefield fluid. The weakness which then becomes apparent in the enemy's defensive line, that is the area where you then penetrate for your final attack. So the sequence for successful battle I always learned my commanders was to um, psychologically dislocate and physically disrupt your enemy forces, to make the battlefield fluid, and to create conditions where you can thrive on initiative and freedom of opportunity, and then to attack your enemy. I always say split your enemy forces in terms of time and space, and then concentrate your own forces in terms of time and space, and attack them consecutively. The Germans spoke about Kesselschlachten, battles of encirclement and annihilation, which was the recipe that we also used in Southeast Angola, specifically against 16 Brigade. Now, did I mention that when I led the planning for the attack on 16 Brigade, I was fortunate to do so. I'll come to that later. But because I was so sort of busy with in-depth studies with regards to mobile warfare, I've just written my first book on mobile warfare in Afrikaans, Mobiele Oorlogvoering, a perspective for Southern Africa, mobile warfare, a perspective for Southern Africa. All these thoughts were so fresh in my mind. And one of the case studies that I used when I wrote that book was to demonstrate these concepts was the Gazala battle, which Rommel fought successfully in North Africa, in the Northern Desert, in May 1942, which he utilized these concepts. And I sort of clearly saw that picture with regards to the planning for the attack on 60 Brigade was very similar, and we could use a lot of lessons applied by Rommel for that attack, also to create the strategic operational framework for the attack against 16 Brigade. So that is also, to my mind, an interesting comparison with regards to warfare, not only in places like North Africa, where you have wide open maneuver spaces, but also in places like Africa as well. All right.
So the Gazala attack, or the Gazala Gallop, was the first and second South African divisions defending Tobruk, and because Rommel was approaching from the west, they put most of their defenses on the western side of Tobruk, but he skipped around to the south and attacked from the east. And
sorry, Tony, for interrupting.
And he obviously captured a lot of men in Tobruk, but the guys that escaped to the east and then reset their defenses at El Alamein, they were the Gazala Gallop, the ones that ran en masse to the east. Yeah.
In actual fact, with the attack on 16 Brigade, that was the idea, to create the Gazala Gallop and to force this large contingent of enemy forces, their brigades, which were deployed to the southeast and to the south of Kwitu-Konowali and the Shambinga rivers, to force them to flee, to make them vulnerable, and then to attack them at different times as they were escaping. But as I will tell you later on, we just did not have sufficient forces available to cause a total destruction of the enemy force. Destruction implying to break his organizational cohesion and to destroy his will to fight. I believe that we probably forfeited three important principles of warfare with regards to that planning. I'll probably mention it again just now. The one was the concentration of forces. We became involved piecemeal in that battle. We were in actual fact thrown at the hounds, but I don't think that was the main idea by the Supreme Command, by the High Command. Of course, the other matter is to maintain operational reserves. We did not really have operational reserves available. The norm for attacking an enemy force is normally to create a disposition where you can attack with 3 against 1. With regards to a brigade, attack them with 3 brigades. If it's a combat group, attack them with a brigade of 3 combat group size. Then you have an inherent ability to deploy your reserves and to maintain speed and momentum in the attack. That we didn't have the latitude for that. And then, of course, the other important principle is, and that happened with the Germans as well at Kursk, is logistic support, to provide proper support. We ran out of support for these battles, and I'll explain later how long it takes to replenish a combat group after it has fought for a day. against an enemy force, and your troops are tired, and you don't have the necessary reserves available to sort of relieve them from their duties for a day or two. Okay.
Before you go into the battle, Roland, which I'm really looking forward to, how did you take into account that the 16th Brigade was flanked by, I think, the 41st or the 47th in the north and the 21st in the south? Did that play into your plans at all?
Yes, absolutely. Because when we made the appreciation of own capabilities vis-a-vis enemy capabilities and how they were deployed, and what their doctrine was, this was taken into full account. And the whole question with regards to time and distance and reaction speed and how fast or slow enemy decision-making was played a crucial role in terms of how we planned and executed this attack. But do not forget, we were fighting under extremely difficult conditions. The ground, the terrain, the dense bushy conditions of Angola favored us with regards to maneuver warfare. And man, we never slept. We were constantly on the move, day and night. But the major threat was the air threat, because they had air superiority. They had the advantage of the modern MiG fighters, MiG-21s, MiG-23s. They had front sector missiles, which could engage our outdated Mirage combat aircraft from any direction. And of course, they fought under radar coverage, and we didn't have radar coverage. The South African Air Force did extremely well during that battle with regards to supporting us with ground attacks, not close air support, ground attacks. I believe that, if I can remember correctly, in the period between October, which was the critical period, from 17 August, I'm going to talk now about the era of Operation Maj-Genl, which lasted from August until mid-December. That is the operation which I also took part in. The Air Force launched more than 600 ground attacks on enemy forces.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to do this very carefully, come in very low, beneath radar, and then pop up. And what they did was toss bombing on the enemy positions from 8 kilometers away. Now, they could do this accurately because we had artillery observation officers, young guys, 17, 18, 19 years old, extremely well trained with regards to the artillery work. I spoke about them as our shadow warriors. They physically moved with the enemy brigades, and they were protected by small teams of UNITA. And with regards to enemy tactics, they were extremely vulnerable because they moved very slowly. They were extremely vulnerable against our G5 155 millimeter howitzer guns, which could fire at a distance more than 45 kilometers. This was a maneuver force in its own right, a killing machine par excellence, and I believe it was the game changer of that operation. And of course, our multiple rocket launchers, the 127 millimeters Valkyries, and we had 120 millimeter mortars, which we could fire at extended range with rockets. So everywhere the enemy moved, they were slaughtered by, when they stopped, the artillery observation officers could bring fire to bear on the enemy positions, caused havoc and a lot of casualties. And they were also extremely well positioned to guide accurate aircraft bombing onto these specific targets. So these are all elements that one must consider when we talk about these battles. We need a day to talk about all these intricacies when it comes to the battle concepts and the tactics that were utilized during this battle. But let's start off very quickly with regards to the background, and please interfere that's not the right word. When something pops to mind.
Interrupt. Yeah.
Like we did in school. Ek wil nou
Yeah.
kamer verlaat. And then we can have a discussion on that.
Yeah.
And the Afrikaans word is gatvol. If you get fed up with my talking and my explanations, just say, Roland, shut up. Let's cut this short now. All right.
I could talk to you all day, Roland. No problem.
Okay, let's start with regards to the battle area now. which was the area which we refer to as Southeast Angola, um, east of the Quito Carnivale rivers, in the southeast corner of Angola, across Southwest Africa. Now, that was during the battles which we are going to talk about, during the 80s. We refer to that as a guerrilla liberated area. It was also a contested area because Savimbi, Dr. Savimbi, who was the leader of UNITA, an extremely effective guerrilla force. If I can remember correctly, they were about 50,000 strong. They operated all over Angola. And because of the nature of guerrilla warfare, they kept the Cubans at bay and they kept them busy all over Angola. And that helped us so that we could concentrate our operations in the right areas and fight with a reasonably latitude with regards to initiative and freedom of action. Now, during the times when Angola was under Portuguese rule, before the Carnation Revolution in 1975, after that they gave Angola back to the Angolans, and that is when the civil war ensued, and UNITA was fighting against the MPLA government. They owned the FAPLA forces, the Angolan armed forces. They were supported by the Cubans and the Russians. This was also during the Cold War era. This was not really our enemy. Our enemy was SWAPO, the Southwest Africa People's Organization, with the People's Liberation Army. They operated during that area from Angola, the southern part of Angola, into the northern operational area of Southwest Africa. So we took the battle to SWAPO, and that's how we came to engage FAPLA, and especially in the areas to the west at Kahama, Sangongu, and Ongiva. And after Operation Protea in 1981, when we destroyed the 11th Brigade and the 19th Brigade of FAPLA, who were in cahoots with SWAPO and were protecting them and were providing bases to them and logistic support. After we destroyed those enemy positions, brigade positions, we created a area of what did we refer to it as? It was a sort of an area in which we had free reign in southern Angola. But I still believe that our attack during Operation Protea forced the enemy, although they do this very slowly, to rethink. And in actual fact, that led to the escalation of war. Southeast Angola remained a contested area and a thorn in the flesh for the Cubans and for FAPLA. And from 1981, every year, they launched operations from Quito Carnivale across the Quito River into Southeast Angola. There were two important target areas for them, which were situated in Southeast Angola. The first one about 150 to 200 kilometers from Quito Carnivale. If you follow that route along the old Portuguese road, is called Mabinga. There's a very important strategic airstrip there, about 800 meters long, which we helped further develop. But it was a gravel airstrip. And then further southeast, quite a distance, I would say it's more than 350 to 400 kilometers, was an important strategic base of Savimbi, referred to as Jamba, which housed one of his main headquarters. Mabinga was the regional HQ for the eastern sector, but they reigned supreme in that area. What was important about keeping UNITA intact in Southeast Angola was the fact that SWAPO couldn't operate from that area into the Okavango province, which we refer to as Sector 20. So they had to infiltrate from the area of the Kunene province to reach the Okavango province, which was quite a distance. So what FAPLA usually wanted to do, their main objective was to capture Mabinga and Jamba. This they did with to my mind, It was not well planned, normally executed with a brigade or two. They advanced from Quito Conowali after securing the bridgehead, and then move in a southeasterly direction with the main aim of capturing Mavinga so that they could control Southeast Angola. Every time UNITA was enabled by the South African Army in a very secretive manner to provide support with Impala jet fighters. At that stage, we could still fly over that area because at that stage there was still air parity. That changed in 1981, 82, the latter months of 1981, and then in 1982, when they took control of the skies. And usually with our support, with a few special forces operators, small contingents of 3-2 battalion, our guerrilla unit, and with multiple rocket launchers and perhaps a battery or two of G5 155 millimeter guns, we could stop them in their tracks. What was interesting, when I deployed for Operation Modular, and specifically with regards to the attack on 16 Brigade, when our small headquarters moved from Mavinga towards our tactical HQ position to the north, very close to 16 Brigade's position at the Kuzuzi River. At many places along the Lomba River, we came across places, it was eerie to see, where there were cairns, is that the right name, steeples of skulls lying heaped together of all the enemy forces that were slaughtered in those areas, and especially along the Lomba River. Now, every time they endeavored to attack Mavinga, they were stopped in their tracks and turned around, and they encountered amazingly amount of casualties, and especially with regards to fire brought down to bear by the multiple rocket launchers, which had small iron marbles, airburst, which rendered their vehicles useless because it penetrated their water systems.
Wow.
And they became extremely vulnerable against indirect fire attack. They tried this again in almost every year, but in 1985 there was a similar incursion, and our Air Force operated from Rundu. Why they never attacked Rundu by air, I just can't imagine, because it was close to the border. Anyway, during that operation specifically, the Impalas were launched every time one of their hind helicopters flew out of Quito Conowali. And in this manner, more than 6 hind helicopters were destroyed by the Impalas. This also stopped them in their tracks. Anyway, they went back to the drawing boards, and they decided enough is enough. And in preparation for their operation from Quito Conowali in 1987, their D-Day was the 17th of August, 1987. They enmassed an impressive force of more than 8 brigades and 2 tactical groups, and with full-blown air support from Monongwe, and also with aircraft flying from places like Lubangu and Quito Conowali itself. They utilized that air force, that airfield extremely effectively, and they had radar coverage over that area. Now, strangely enough, I know that some of our special forces operators operating along the route from Monongwe, where their main support base and the airfield was, towards Quito Conowali, a stretch of road which approximately 200 kilometers, which the Cubans and the FOPLA forces referred to as Death Road, because they were prone to ambushes there, not only by our special forces, but also by the UNITA guerrillas, and they were also vulnerable against air attack. And it was a mine-strewn road. So the logistic support towards Quito Conowali was done very carefully at walking speed, because they had every time they had to replenish Quitoconavale. And just think about the amount of ammunition that a brigade uses, especially the artillery ammunition.
Yeah.
It was a cumbersome effort, and they were extremely vulnerable with regards to logistic support across that area, which were referred to as Death Road. Now, somehow our intelligence services didn't pick up the fact that there was going to be a massive advance towards Mavinga and Jamba, with the idea to capture those two important strategic areas. Although the signs were there, our special forces reported it, but I think there was a sort of a mindset set that it will be more of the same. So suddenly, on the doorstep of UNITA, in August 1987, amassed at this important stronghold were 8 enemy brigades and 2 tactical groups. Remember, eventually we fought with only 1 brigade of about 3,000 men, supported by G5 artillery batteries. I think we had 2, and about 2 multiple rocket launcher batteries, and 1 or 2 120mm mortar batteries, working closely with UNITA. They had approximately 5 battalions, I should say about 5,000 men, working with us in that operation arena. But this was a massive force. I started talking about our little group as a band, a Gideon's band, 3,000 against more than 30,000, with no fighting, with no air support. But this came as a surprise to us, to the High Command of the South African Defence Force, and then specifically South African Army HQ, who was responsible as the lead agent to plan and execute this operation. From hearsay evidence, excuse me, and later on this was confirmed, our army did not want to become involved in these battles anymore. But what happened? Also hearsay, which was confirmed later on, Savimbi flew from Jamba to Cape Town, probably with one of our Chief of Staff Intelligence Learjets, to go and talk to President P.W. Botha personally, and he explained the situation to P.W. Botha, and he said, please, I once again need your support. Now, what happened? We, of course, P.W. Botha said, right, we will now do our darndest to support you. But initially, excuse me, sorry, Tony.
All right.
Initially, we became piecemeal involved in this operation. So when the operation started, the advance of FAPLA started on the 17th of August 1987. They were deployed in brigade groups. If you think about the map and you venture into southeast Angola, on the extreme west, you have the Kuzuzi River, and then further to the east you have the Kunzumbia River, and then the Portuguese Road, which leads towards the Lomba River. Both those rivers intersect with the Lomba River to the south, and then you have Mavinga and the important airfield. Now, the brigades advanced sort of separately along river lines, and in between the river lines and roads. That's the tactic, their mode of operation, which is extremely attritionist-minded, and I believe also for replenishment, water replenishment, and then, of course, to help them with navigation. Because at that stage, we didn't use sat-nav. We were using prismatic compasses and maps to navigate our way in Angola.
Now, I believe the river lines there were very wide. It created what you called a shona.
Floodplain.
Very flat, so it wasn't like walking along or driving along.
No, it was that's fortunate for us. I sent you one picture, and it's important when you look at these battles to realize that there were vast maneuver areas to the east and west of the Quitoconavale River, not looking at national boundaries between states, because what you could do is sort of almost freely operate between these rivers, because there were strategic crossing places. The one at the Longa, the little hamlet of Longa, on the Longa River, halfway between Monongwe and Quitoconavale, was very important for our planning. And of course, the crossing place at Quitoconavale, which was a rickety bridge at that stage. It took quite a while for the enemy to cross that bridge with a brigade, hours to cross that bridge, and to get their logistics across. That's why it was important for them to have forces on both sides of the river. And just to come back to that, when the advance of the enemy started in August 1987, they were advancing with 4 brigades towards Mavinga separately. On the western side was 4-7 Brigade and 1 tactical group. That was their mobile reserve. Between the Kuzuzi and Kunzumbia rivers were 21 Brigade and 16 Brigade and 1 tactical group they shared. And to the east of the Kunzumbia River, between the Kunzumbia River and the old Portuguese road, you had 59 Brigade. So they were advancing en masse from the Cuito-Carnivale salient towards Mavinga to capture Mavinga. The idea of 47th Brigade was to move to execute a right flanking attack on Mavinga with the support of the other brigades, and that brigade was coming around the source of the Lomba River, and they were trying to get to the south of the Lomba River because the Lomba River was a main obstacle for them. And then you had 2 brigades protecting Cuito-Carnivale to the east. If I can remember correctly, there was 66 Brigade and 25 Brigade. They were in the area which we refer to as the Tumpu area, the Quartier, and they protected the crossing over the Shambinga, which was a lock-strewn fording place, which was not so easy to cross in the rainy season. Then you had 1 brigade, 13 Brigade protecting and defending Cuito-Carnivale, and there was 1 brigade, 8 Brigade. That brigade was responsible to ferry logistics between Monongwe and Cuito-Carnivale. That was the main job of that brigade. So that was the deployment for the battles which ensued between August and September. So what we had were a few special forces units, teams, actual fact teams, reconnaissance teams from 3-2 Battalion, a battery of 127mm mortar, multiple rocket launchers, later on a battery of 155mm G5 guns, 120mm mortars, very small Air Force support contingent, a Bosbok reconnaissance aircraft was shot down over the Lomba River in the months of August, September. That stopped our reconnaissance with light aircraft. If I can remember correctly, one of our Seeker unmanned aerial vehicles were also shot down over that period. So this made it very difficult for us to do reconnaissance. Fortunately, we had special forces teams who could do close reconnaissance for us. The reconnaissance teams of 3-2 Battalion were superb, and UNITAL gave us information. We could intercept radio messages of the enemy through electronic warfare means. We had those means available, and but that was almost all we had available to gather intelligence. And our artillery observation officers physically moving with the brigades, our shadow warriors, were those small contingents who operated almost adjacent to every enemy brigade, was one of our main sources of intelligence. So what happened during this advance? Fortunately for us, the enemy was moving extremely slowly. They advanced, well, I followed some of their tracks many a time. They sort of advanced in 5 columns. The whole brigade formed up in 5 columns at a very slow pace, 4 kilometers per day, which made them vulnerable against ground and air attack. And this gave us time for our deployments to take place. Firstly, later on, 3-2 Battalion was deployed in full. And then later on in September, 61 Mechanized Battalion Group was deployed and started forming 20 Brigade. And then it became apparent to the High Command, South African High Command, that it was necessary to deploy another battalion group, which was 4th South African Infantry Battalion, organized in a similar manner as 61 Mechanized Battalion. It was a mechanized battalion. Fortunately, the High Command made a decision that we had to mobilize a squadron of tanks, 12 main Olifant main battle tanks, and with one in reserve, uh, uh, provided for by the School of Army in Bloemfontein, and their first commander was Major Andre Retief. And they joined 4th South African Infantry Battalion. Their commander was Commandant Leon Marais, and they were mobilized and on their way, and they crossed the Kubango River, which flows into the Quito near Rundu on the 20th of October. Now, to come back to the enemy advance, there were many skirmishes. It's almost like rapier fighting along the Lomba River, where 3-2 Battalion caused a lot of damage with the G5 guns and the multiple rocket launchers to 21 Battalion and their tactical group, and 21 Brigade, their tactical group, 16 Brigade, and 5-9 Brigade, whilst they tried to cross the Lomba River. Now, at that stage, Dion Ferreira was in command of the 20 Brigade, exquisite officer with a great tactical mind. He was sitting in a tactical HQ just to the south of Lomba River, and they had a few Buffel mine-protected vehicles, so they weren't mobile at all, and they were almost stationary, but he commanded and coordinated the battle from that position, just to the south of the Lomba River, somewhere between the Kuzusi and the Kuzimbia rivers, if you had to draw a line further southwards. And then during the advance of Fapla, with the idea of capturing Mavinga, 47th Brigade marched around the Lomba River, at the source of the Lomba River, and then started moving in a westerly direction towards Mavinga, with the idea of capturing Mavinga. And then a fortunate battle took place. Exquisite timing, but 6-1 Mechanized Battalion Group was instructed to attack and destroy the 47th Brigade on the 3rd of October 1987. Now, this was a massive fight, which endured for a long time. It's a story to be told on its own. The forces needed to replenish ammunition, I don't know how many times. We didn't endure many casualties, which was, I would like to say, a godsend. I can't imagine that our forces didn't incur more casualties. But on that specific day, 47th Brigade was destroyed in toto, plus the tactical group which supported them. With other words, that brigade was taken off the troop list completely. They tried to escape across the river, and at some stage during this battle, and 6-1 Mechanized Battalion Group was commanded by Cobus Smith, Lieutenant Colonel Cobus Smith. And he said, just stop the slaughtering. So he stopped the fight because 47th Brigade just disappeared off the troop list, as if by magic. Now, this was what I referred to also in the book that I wrote on mobile warfare as the first turning maneuver of that war. Because suddenly it was as if the whole Papua Cuban coalition force was induced with shock, if that's the right English word. Yeah. Suddenly, surprisingly so. And a decision was made by their high command to turn their forces around and then to return to their previous forming up positions, their concentration areas, and they fled back and occupied these defensive positions, which became an intermediate defensive position between the Lomba River, the Shambinga River, and eventually towards Quito Carnivale and the Quito River. Now, these brigades were deployed mostly at the confluences of rivers, rather the sources of rivers and the confluences of rivers, because they knew that they needed water desperately, because that was one of the main problems that they incurred during previous battles where they ran out of water. So logistics played an extremely important role. Excuse me. Now, if you think back of the picture that I sent to you about the battles of Kazala, and we make a comparison, you find that 16th Brigade was deployed at the source of the Shambinga River. It was the furthest deployment to the west. They were responsible with 2 brigades who were deployed at the Shambinga crossing to protect that critical crossing, which was also a logistic replenishment route, and also important for the protection of Kwetu-Konowali, and also in support of the brigades which were deployed further to the south. Now, I still believe that the idea of FAPLA was to do a reappreciation and then to decide to further their purpose, and that was to attack Mavinga and later on Chamba. So this was sort of respite in the battle for them. And they took long to make a decision to understand that the situation has suddenly changed and that they desperately needed to do a proper, deliberate reappreciation with regards to the whole situation, the whole military situation developing around them. So deployed further to the south at the sources of the rivers were the remaining brigades. And then in between the Hubi River, which flows out of the Shambinga River to the south, you get the Viposto high ground. That was the position for the operational headquarters, and also where the tactical mobile reserve, which was 2 tactical group, was now deployed. And then further to the south at the Mianai River, you had 21 Brigade, and with remnants of 25 Brigade, there was the battalion deployed at the confluence of the Mianai and the Kwetu River as defensive lines. Now, they extended almost 45 kilometers to the south. And they were in these strong point defensive positions. And the skirmishing continued between us and them. We were now allowed to deploy the G5s much closer, and we could start fighting on Kwetu-Konowali as well. At that stage, the chief of the army instructed me. I was the second in command at the Army Battle School. And early in October, I had a phone call and I was instructed to meet him in his office. I would say it was about the 7th of October. I met him in his office and he said, Roland, this is the situation with regards to the operations being fought in Southeast Angola. I'm going to deploy you to Southeast Angola to join 20 Brigade as a sort of advisor with regards to the employment of mobile forces, but we're contemplating the possibility of attacking Kwetu-Konowali from the west. And if that happens, I want you to be the commander of that force. Sally forth to Rundu and start evaluating the situation. And in due course, the High Command of the South African Defence Force, General Yannick Gelneys, was the chief of the Defence Force. Excuse me, and General Kat Liebenberg was the chief of the army. Will come and listen to the plans to be presented.